What has come to my mind, though, more importantly, is the hype of the next world event. And I don't want to say what it is, but I see that the many alternative channels are posting it around as if they are hunting the rabbits. Literally, like rabid dogs hunting for that, sensational exploitation of, I knew it was going to happen and I prepared for it. Or it's the end of the world and that's it. That old REM song. So, my take on this, as you know, is always about reminding you that you are existing within a reality that is overlaid by something that is called the system overlay. And the system overlay is manipulated with archetype technology. I'm calling it the archetype technology because whatever you worship, you believe in, you give faith to, you focus on, if you put a lot of your energy into something that is outside of you, you build an archetype worship or a thing that you worship, an idol or a statue or a belief or a drive for fear. And so the more you do this, the more this thing starts to become an actual element. It becomes alive. And how does it operate? I don't think I've actually ever explained why the soul is so vital alongside the spirit and the balance of the mind and the physical body and the emotions in balance. All of these things are very vital to ascertain life. What I've found to be more important is to actually explain to you the real essence as to why things happen and why things are the way they are. This is a much more serious script keeper review or reveal, and the information in it is actually extremely vital. I actually hope that someone would interview me on this, but I'm saying this out loud for whomever, whatever, because it requires that much focus on it. I thought there was a reason I should actually come along and really share with you the details as to what myself and few others have been sitting with for many, many years, and that perhaps all that has ever been done is to drop little breadcrumbs here and there for people to listen to. But given the seriousness of the actual subject itself, I found it vital to share how things are. Now, I've made countless notes and I've written all of this down, and hopefully maybe one day I'll put this all into a book, because not one part of the material that's ever come to me or that's ever been shared with me from within my higher spirited connection with the original creator has ever been duplicated, which I know as a fact, which means every part or everything that comes to me is shared to me and I must make with it what I do. As always, that is my free choice and my free will that I'm exerting or exercising. And you can do with this as you will. Specifically, those of you who are who have always been very consistent on this group, on this channel, I want to firstly say thank you very much for all of your support in every way that you have done. So for those that have also been on my membership section, that have been sponsoring me to help make these works more available, I want to say thank you also to you. And so I'd like to start off by starting to explain to you what a field or fabric is in the manner in which we speak about in the plane of reality. The energetic dimension, I suppose you could call it that, or the etheric level. And why the soul is vital for them as a food source. I've said that the soul is your world wanderer. Your world wanderer is also the anima mundi. It's a lovely word that describes the capacity in which you operate and you exist within this reality. And what you use with all your faculties in balance is really all part of the process. But the soul energy in itself emits an energetic frequency, like a type of material or a type of glue that holds the system together when creation takes place. So that's a number one big nugget. And it's not the major proponent for it, though. It's more like a supplement form of energy as a product in which the soul functions within this reality. So basically, it only adds to whatever is being created in your thoughts. Your soul emits that frequency for it to become something more tangible. And so if a person dies and his or her soul transitions into their spirit, and so forth, the process gets more involved. And I'm leaving all the more involved aspects and details for those who will be wanting to be on my lecture for the metaphysics, because I will be discussing these things in much more detail, in a much more scientific manner, metaphysically. I will address the following in a simplified manner for you. So when you leave your physical form, you'd pass over, you leave a signature behind, which acts as if it's like a placeholder for where you once existed within. And the time and space shrinks back to its original density, but it normally takes a few days for it to take place. That is energy in itself. That is that type of glue or that proponent or supplement that your soul itself leaves behind, alongside your body, of course, which becomes then either buried or cremated or whatever you do. And that then completes the entire process of the exit, of your physical mortal exit. And people often say that they feel that they still feel the deceased with them. And this doesn't mean that the spirit of the deceased is not there, but the resonance of which the soul leaves behind a signature is then present for the person that is in the living to experience, which, as I said now, is part of how the density starts to formulate around that. It's like you leave a placeholder behind. That is your energy that comes off or that radiates from your soul. And so I hope that by now you're starting to see why the soul, in essence, is so vital to the ministry of magic and ritualistic occultists or cultists. The presence of a person leaves a resonance behind. It's much like a pine tree. When you cut into the tree bark, there's a residue that comes out of that bark, and that is amber. That becomes amber eventually, and that also is something that pockets or holds or collects on an etheric manner, like a plasma field, things. And that plasma field or resonance or residue or what it then is used, or it's used by the energy of this reality to patch up the spot in which you had existed in. And that is why I've been saying for years now that you start to build your own immediate environment. You start to build your immediate reality. You put yourself in your own reality bubble. You start to build that process because it becomes your power node in which you've existed in, which you have shared your life and your happiness with those that you care for, and that you've been connecting with. And it is important that you have that. I will explain why in the next part. I also want to tell you that we would need to also add the other attributes, of course, as in your deeds and how you do and you operate in this world, and also to take in consideration that the physical reality in which you exist, even though it's comprised out of energy, still uses or utilizes energy in what way, shape or form to create certain things, such as lava with excess heat or diamonds however you look at it, minerals in the world. Minerals are made up more predominantly when these things take place. So when your physical body deteriorates and returns back to its original building blocks, it exists out of multiple density elements, which I have discussed before in my previous videos, where I explain the importance of you to the system overlay. You are food, to put it in that, but it's not exactly that simple. It's not exactly that reduced. So I don't want to give information on that because I have discussed it before. So if I wanted to change my immediate reality or my reality bubble, the place that I exist within, which is comprised out of my consciousness, my mind, my body, my soul, my spirit, my interactions with those that I am connected with and not connected with, and my essential connection with the sacred root or the sacred creator of the world, or the original creator, that which is not fake, that which was and is always to be the original creator, then that becomes my immediate environment or my bubble reality. You want to call it like that. And while I plan this reality bubble, I am also internally creating and energetically reaffirming consciously and constructively myself within this reality and within this smaller part of myself, within this bubble. And this then creates a field or fabric, which is also aesthetic and is also based on actions within, that becomes the focus of yourself and what you make with it. You create within that reality. And so that can only exist and become something that is more tangible for you once it becomes excited. So we're talking about excited elements or atoms that then form through jolts of electromagnetic currency energy in the etheric realm within your immediate reality. That then becomes a hyper reality, which means it's hyper because it's your focus, your hyper focus. And that is not to be misunderstood or associated with quantum mechanics or physics or simulation, although they would like to make it that. I'm explaining it to you in terms of a metaphysical perspective, and I will explain what you will experience within this next part. Like I said, this excerpt that I'm sharing with you is in my lecture, and so I'm sharing it with you because I feel it's vital to understand the process while I'm putting the lecture together. And so the field or fabric interacts now more than ever with the noosphere. It's something that I've mentioned before. Vladimir Vernadsky has mentioned it as well. He equated the noosphere with the biosphere of this reality. And it is heavily pushed because it is the main arena for what archetypes live and exist within. Archetypes are entities that have become real because of belief, worship, and faith in the energies around it. Rituals, sacrifices, and these aspects, these actions, have brought forward an excitement, not in a positive way, but in a form of pushing the energy up in frequency. So when modules or elements or cells become excited, something starts to happen. There's an electrical force or field of energy starts to take place. Okay. Like I said, I've sat with this information for many years, for a long time, and I've never really brought it across into such a depth that I feel is more important than now. It's more important now than ever. And so what is the purpose of the noosphere? Well, first of all, I've just explained to you that the noosphere is related to the archetypes that exist within it, but that's just the middle part of the story. That's not really the whole thing. The noosphere, in essence, is really the consciousness that is the mental sheath or mental consciousness layer of the thinking field of the world. This would be the DNA type of reference, perhaps, in which intelligence of bees, for example, or how DNA or the mind or the brain or all of these things, or why birds weave nests in a particular way, or why insects build things in a particular way, or when seasons happen or is meant to happen takes place. It's not an outside field. It's not something that is like you could see it from a distance. It is all around you, and you are within it all the time. The noosphere is also to be understood to be the biosphere, according to Vladimir Vernadsky. However, I want to focus more on the actual essence of the spiritual consciousness, the mentality or the intelligence of that field. And so the biosphere is what has also been misunderstood as the hemisphere and the stratosphere and all those spheres that are around the world, or that form the world, to put it like that, the reality. And what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm trying to explain that it's a type of collective conscious area or place of the mental realm of the world. It is as vital to this world as any living organism lives within its space. You cannot live without it. If you cannot live within it, you become not alive. You become unalive. Okay, and I'm not going to use the other stuff for it. I'll see. When the noosphere is accessed, and you do this constantly by thinking, we're talking within it right now, many people misunderstand that also to be God, or a place where angels hang around, you know. And as the reality that folds around you when you sit in your thinking field, you access the noosphere instinctively, primarily through your mental thoughts. When you think of something, you start to interact with it by then thinking how it should become. It's where your imagination plays, call it a sandbox maybe. And your imagination and your conscious thoughts and things start to churn inside of your mind, and it then starts to play itself out in the noosphere, which is around you and within you. You are in it and it is within you, just as you are, for example, like a fish. The water is inside the fish as well as around the fish. The fish breathes it in and breathes it out again. So you must see the noosphere as well. Unfortunately, it's also been taken out of a lot of context. It's been turned into a New Age drive. And unfortunately, we can only thank the Jesuit priests who has Pierre Taylard, who has unfortunately conveyed that shit across to people. So you never really get to understand it truly for what it is. But I would hope that you would take it from this point. So it's a place where thoughts in an abstract reality becomes more tangible. I guess you could call it the testing ground for imagination. So it operates in a slower pace, but also not. It is relative to you. And this is where perhaps the relativity theory becomes more possible as well. I think that Einstein perhaps discovered the operations of the noosphere and so on. It depends on how much you give it to build for you your sandbox of ideas, fears or realities. Whatever is in your imagination, it is projected into that place before it becomes something real. So you would need to have a place where you have your thoughts accumulate within your consciousness, and once you start to explore it and you venture then into that field around you, where you then entertain your fears or ideas. And then obviously a succession of things that take place afterwards, you then start to become more physically active within that idea or fear or ideology of that reality, and so it then starts to take place for you. So let's say the noosphere is the engineer for your creative thoughts. Okay, now I don't have any fear in explaining this information because they also know about it. The Ministry of Magic is also aware of it, but if I speak about it, it means that I'm trying to explain to you what they already know. So I'm putting everyone all on the same page. And so it'll be perhaps also a little bit shocking for them, some of them, perhaps not all of them, when they find out the next part of the information, which I will tell you eventually. And so I apologize, the video will be a little lengthy, but I have added images in which are not really going to be the focus for my work, more so the fact that I would wish for you to just listen to what I'm saying. And so sometimes spirits, when people have passed on, often wander and find their way into that field as well. That happens. And they may perceive it as either heaven or hell. It is not the place that you would find yourself essentially to go towards. So, but you can imagine that if you didn't work on yourself for a long time, that you would essentially have lost the direction. Especially if you believe a lot in the latest programs that have been perpetuating itself, like the year of the rabbit, which is the year of the major rabbit hole, because what else is it then? It's just another brand for a program that's operating, as you know, as part of the system overlay. So I'm expecting that you use some common sense when you listen here. And so, like I said, many souls, many spirits, people that have disincarnated will have found themselves there thinking that they would be in that reality as either heaven or hell, because that's what they perhaps believed. And so it simply is the field of mental consciousness for any reality to become real for you. The noosphere characterizes mind and consciousness as a unity. It recognizes mind and consciousness as a couple, as a unity, as something that is whole. And archetypally, you would be able to see it as mind as being male and consciousness being female. And that is how the two operate in unity. So the noosphere would only allow a unity or a harmony within those two aspects or potential poles to unite in harmony. And so mind cannot ever exist without consciousness and vice versa. The masculine properties of the mind, if it is without consciousness, then, well, then, like I said, if the noosphere cannot acknowledge that there's a unity in those two, then you are not alive. You are unalive. And so it is within this noosphere where ideas came about. Here's the agenda aspect that I want to share with you. What I definitely strongly believe, as I'm saying, and it takes a lot for me to say that I believe in it, because I know for a fact, as I'm saying this to you 100% here, that the Ministry of Magic, the elites, the criminal parasitic element that is causing a lot of damage in this reality, has not become aware of it, or maybe they have. But I think personally that this information perhaps may go over their heads too. And I'm saying it without meaning anything else by it, because I think it's something that most people are completely unaware of, unless there are some of you who are definitely aware of this, and I know that you are. I know who you are too. And so, no, we're not going to rush ahead now. I'm going to explain the details, so be patient. The greatest hack that could ever have been pulled off magically and intentionally took place over a few thousand years. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It has taken place for a few thousand years, but I'm not going to give you number crunches. So the system overlay was birthed. Fine, you say, okay, you understand what I mean. The system overlay became the counterfeit belief or reality that had started to become more real and more tangible for those that have existed within it. And this had then conformed and confounded the minds of men to become subjected into an external belief system. I want to bring in the Kabbalah, the tree of Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah itself, mainly because, yes, I keep harping on it, but it is vital, because we have to admit, just as we look at all the information that we put together, that we have to consider all aspects as part of this material. And so I want to bring in, like I said, the Kabbalah, because of the belief system that it holds and it is vital. It's a type of inner knowing that has become externalized and then edited and changed so much that it became the Torah. Either way, one truth that was always embellished or ascertained was synonymous to the meaning of the word Kabbalah, which in Hebrew is really the word Sod, means, and this means the secret reality, which is abstract into and forces and energetic correlations that lead to creation and speak in terms of the animation of the world and the like and the multi-worlds. That's what it means. It means, in simple terms, the secret of the abstract which enforces and energetically correlates to and with itself and leads to the creation where worlds are created through speaking. That's basically what it is. The word creates, in simple terms. Unfortunately, those who had held onto that secret had tried to be very careful with it. That's why they had only orally transmitted it across to their students of the time. And some of the students thought it would be best just to edit it and put it into documentation form, and then so it started to break down the meaning of that specific secret. It broke down the sacredness of that reality, of that experience. However, the rabbi had shared it with his students, so while he does that, he then creates a world within that student. So what else is that? So it really is just what it is it not? It was this ancient secret within all the minds of men and women for many centuries that as per oral traditions, as I've just said, that have now been penned down and externalized. And so, as you know, the human progress, there would be statues built and then religions would be formed, and so the counterfeit reality began. The counterfeit reality had slowly developed over time. As I said, it's developed. They take long, and they need a long time to put their things into place, and had now essentially needed to have a middlemen or elites or little dictators or whatever else, things, pawns, religions, sciences, social orders, belief systems, ideologies, political agendas, etc., 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 to harness this ability, the secret. And so, before you know it, knowing now that you know that the noosphere exists within, and I've explained to you what it means, you can imagine that, or you don't even have to imagine, you must just realize more and more people had become focused on the external receptivity of a God to believe in. We know this history. I've told you many times about it, and I've told you about how religions externalized the original existence to replace the original creator, because the original creator is not visible, but it is present in all things, and it will always be that way. They know it and you know it. So the counterfeit reality needed a God to lord over it, of course. It figures that they've become aware that they know about the noosphere and that they needed to put something in there, in its place. And so too also did the character of Yaldabaoth, the entity that became an imprinted, made up, become born as, or born again, as this proto-archetype to live from the Gnostic scriptures, wandering to rule them all, of course. And one man-made God, in belief and worship, through powerful focus, had then, with men and women, through their prayers, ascertained the belief and the religion to this God, to this thing that now became a God. And as I've said, you can find out, you know, that it's the same parasitic entity or element or thing that has existed for centuries. It's just had many other names to it. And it required a planet. So the Saturn planet was, during the times of the ages, through historical and geographical changes, as we know, that it's a natural process for the world to go through, because seriously, We can't just live in one skin. We change, we grow up, we mature, we evolve, we get fat, we get thin, we get old, and we die. And so they wanted to create an eternal planet that is pervertedly hooked towards or on or attached to this god, and they used the planet of Saturn as the dark or black sun for the gods to believe in. And so cults were formed out of that belief. And so because the system needed that thing, which needed a king to sit proudly with its crown and lord over your thoughts, there the first belief in something evil had become developed. Because humans need something to counter something else. It's the common knowledge of how a human mind operates. And so much belief was given to something that was externally based and yet was also rooted into the original ancient aspects of the pre-Diluvian and even beyond that. Meaning everything that was even prior to this world was then hooked or roped into that belief system. And so the changing and the perversion of the original symbolism of the existence of this reality had started to take place. And so the ancient original secret, or the word Kabbalah, meaning secret of creation, was developed as a secret teaching in itself, which was never supposed to be, supposedly, and was passed along again over and over and over. And so many that had become enamored with it. There was a peak of romanticizing it during the 1970s, and so it started to manufacture even more alternate realities and meta worlds or multiple worlds. And so this constant belief and worshipping of an entity that is perceived as a god, as an archetype within the noosphere itself, had started to become seeded. This is even before Babylonians came into presence. This is before any civilizations had started to be what they are, but is the root for all sacrifices and rituals to take place in civilizations, because civilizations gain that knowledge, and in so requires to create sacrifice so that it can perpetuate that world. That God requires a world to be perpetuated for it to exist within. It's like the boogeyman needs you to believe in it all the time, so you are presented with fearful things that you can always equate to the boogeyman. There's always something bad that must happen. And if you want to appease it and make sure that you're going to be okay, you need to make sure that you sacrifice a lot of goats and people for it. Using a lot of people to be scapegoats too. You can do it in your mind as well. That's why these magicians are doing it as well. And so this is the hijacking of something that existed within, that has always been here, that had been the field of your consciousness in physical form, in your reality. What I need to explain to you before that, though, is I did mention to you that I brought up the idea of Metatron, which is not an idea, it's a fact, it's a tool. And the hijacking of the counter force, or the Metatronic cube, was then harnessed. Like a computer that's been hacked and imprinted another belief system into its place, millions of mirror realities were built while that took place, and is still ongoing as we speak. I do want to bring to you I want to demystify for you the whole idea about black goo as well, because there's just too much bullshit that operates around that idea. Black goo is it's the same as the residual that comes out of the tree, out of the pine tree, as the same residue that your soul leaves behind within this reality when you pass on. And it is black goo that was black, became black because of the negative forces and the archetypes that were put into the noosphere. Satanists and black magicians constantly focus on the noosphere so that they can gain the power of the archetype that's there. They can call up the archetype or a god that lives in that sphere so that it can basically come into this reality and create damage, can wreak havoc. The black goo is the same thing. It turned black. It was never black, it was white. It was never goo, it was a substance that came from it. It was the original idea or the original process of when you go into hyper reality within your consciousness, and there are these visions that come to you. I think the Buddhists may have presented it as the white seminal fluid. It is the same thing. However, the white seminal fluid is also found in plants and trees and things like that. In nature, why is the seminal fluid white? Because that is the residual element that is rich in light. It is rich in electrical current of energy. And that energy is there to physically help to create, to energize the cells for life to happen. It became black. And the reason it became black is because it became polluted by all the archetypes that were shoved into the noosphere. All the rituals that took place in the world, all the people that their lives were taken for that purpose, to poison the noosphere. And the black goo became the residual substance, which I know many people become confused with oil as being black goo. It does have an aspect to it, but it does not necessarily, it is not essentially exactly that. It's just yet another supplement of it. I'm talking about the belief that black goo is something that basically comes from this world. Yes, it does, but it actually comes from the poison that was put into the noosphere by people. And that becomes the life force for that archetypal god or that system overlay, that thing to use to manufacture realities. And so you could say that the black goo, I would call angry, it's an angry biosphere bleeding out while being poisoned by false negative malevolence, murders and rituals and disrespect for life made in the name of the false gods who live like a hierarchy within the system overlay, nested firmly in the noosphere. I could call it all that. I think it's best to do that. The idea of AI comes from that specific thing. Like I said, the Metatron tool or instrument, it was used to perpetuate energy so that things would move, so that things would become created. And so too was the power of the Metatronic tool accessed, and millions of mirror realities were built around that. Think of it as a black disco ball, call it like that. I always use that. All has its root in this age, operated by an ancient power of belief. The archetype of the origin of the black goo came into being also. And so black goo was originally the byproduct, or as I said, the supplement, or that residue that is left behind when there's a cut made in the tree. Before it becomes amber, before it becomes solidified, it's still in liquid form. So it goes through a serious process of alchemy as well. The goo itself behaves in a metatronic manner. So it is intelligent. Yes, naturally speaking, the noosphere is intelligent. It's a living thing that exists out of your with consciousness and mental activity. And so too, it would become the driver, the revered devil, and the alien god, to be the ruler and the blueprint for almost all parasitic life, as we know. In this noosphere, we can also call up the false gods, overlays, archetypes, Yalda, Baoth, Yahweh, Yalda, Moloch, Baal, whatever you want to call it. The list of the names are endless. Solomon's keys for the 72 names for the devils or demons or spirits are in there. They've been put there. Solomon's temples are part of it. These may have studied that specific knowledge that I'm sharing with you. And the original existence of this world, for it to be functioning, requires this, knowing that the world requires a counterforce to perpetuate a balance for life to go forward, gone out of control, becoming something that is even more parasitic than it should have been. And while they realize this, and so do we now, or we have always realized this, we now also see that their whole plan, or their plans in terms of needing to create something out of this mess, because the original noosphere is so polluted, they have started to create with the black goo, or the hemorrhaging of the goo, and that which has happened around it, another sphere, another noosphere, and that is called the system overlay. Now you know the origin of how the system overlay had become. The internet is the electrical carrier wave pattern for the system overlay to function in the artificially created system overlay. And the artificially created system overlay is basically formed out of the same copied power of the counterforce, yet it's limited, because when there are copies made in the universe, every copy becomes a weaker version of the previous one. And that's how it works. So creating counterforces to uphold the second noosphere, or the second biosphere, which obviously requires smart cities to become the power nodes for it. And then bubbling everyone into little holes or little boxes or little coom pods, as J. Dyer calls it, puts everyone into that place, in that space in their mind, so that there's never any access to the original noosphere or the biosphere. Don't walk outside in nature. Your air will pollute the world. So go and live in a box with artificially pumped air, so that you don't become, so that you don't become a liability. Soylent Green. This means that the quality and the nature of your individual and collective thoughts become artificial as well. And so it goes on. And so what I want to leave with you to understand is, understand that the Earth's mental capacity, or the field, or the sheath, or the noosphere represents the breakthrough to new consciousness always. It's your sandbox. A new time and a new reality arising from the biosphere. It is a crisis. And by now the noosphere has been oversaturated with so much false information and some good information that also became swallowed up by it, that it's now trying to rid itself from all the parasitic influences from everyone, including the Rothschilds and their cadre and everybody else. So the technology of the noosphere had become more and more hijacked, and artificial systems of multi-worlds had been utilized to create constantly, to build this new noosphere 0.2.0 that is false. That is a genetic, an artificially created dead man field. It is tinkering and interfering with animal and DNA, alive or not alive, necromancy, magic, black magic and chaos magic that was used, but never without the sacrifices of lives to feed the AI system. The artificially intelligent system doesn't mean that it's one giant robot sitting there, or one giant computer, like everyone's become all obsessed with the chat GPT, which is just a glamorized Ouija board for recipes to build the second noosphere. So if you are curious, stop. Don't even go there. Don't feed it your essence, because that is what it seeks from you, even if you ask a stupid question. I went there, I looked there, and I found that it's based on what you feed it, and I felt dizzy. So I knew that there's an energy frequency from that thing. It's not from my machine. Maybe it is, but it keyed into my consciousness. So don't go and feed the glorified chat GPT glamorized Ouija board.com bullshit. Don't. In all of this, there are those such as us, others who are driving the energy forces out. We are working on it. Like I said, I'd wish that this information would actually go and reach more people. So please like and subscribe and share. But first you'd have to obviously introduce why we are where we are. So you may need to start at level 1. And the idea about this current affair of the stress or the fear of this world cataclysmic event number 3 is how to generate more energy so that the noosphere 2.0 false overlay, system overlay, false world or false biosphere can happen. They require a certain percentage of your mental and conscious ability. So I'm leaving it with you. Decide what you want to do with it. Look after yourself. Look after your thoughts. Focus on your balance. Until next time.